Hey everybody, Charlie Stevens here. Thank you so much for tuning in to this guitar lesson. So in our last lesson we learned about rests in music, and today we're going to learn about how rests apply to our chord playing. So when we're playing chords, rests are very important because we need to silence the strings from ringing all the time. If the strings were always ringing, it would sound a little monotonous. We need to break up some of that. You know, I'm playing little bits of silence in there. That's really cool. You're not going to be able to achieve the percussive sound you're looking for without kind of getting the hang of this. And it's a tricky thing. It's a tricky thing. When I work with students and I show them, I can say, okay, strum down here, strum up here. But teaching them how to put these little rests in between is a little bit tricky. So this is kind of an intro to a more advanced topic of just being a really sensitive rhythm player and putting little bits of silences in your playing. But in this lesson, we're going to put larger chunks. We're going to use quarter note rests, which we recently learned about. And this will just be a great, easy segue into that kind of playing where we're putting these smaller separations. Because oftentimes, they're not really represented by rests. You know, we wouldn't even really quantify the amount of time in that way necessarily. You just almost put in these little silences without thinking about it. So in order to do that, we need to get really comfortable at muting all of our strings when we play a chord. So when we first learn a chord, we play it all, it just rings out. So when we want to silence it, we have to stop it from ringing. We have to touch the strings again, okay? We can either do that with the left hand, the fretting hand that is. If you're left-handed, then you might play the opposite way for me, but your fretting hand, whichever one that may be, and your picking hand or strumming hand, the other hand, right? Either hand can accomplish this, okay? Sometimes it's even a combination of them both at the same time. So in our lesson on how to practice chords, we talked about practicing the shape and then like relaxing our hand and coming back to the shape. So that's a really great exercise for this, because when I'm doing these, when I'm stopping my strings from ringing out, I'm often just relaxing my hand. Just kind of didn't do anything over here. I just kind of relaxed the shape. It almost still looks like the shape. Okay, but I just relaxed it instead, and it's just muting everything now, okay? So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about just a few basic exercises on a few different chords and how to get them to mute, and in a very basic way, but remember, this is leading towards a more advanced concept of really locking into your percussive rhythm playing capabilities. This is really essential for that, in my opinion. Okay, cool. So in example number 1, we're going to use this G5 chord grip that we've recently learned about. Go back and check out the video on the cowboy G chords of their different varieties, and check that out if you need a reviewer on this chord here. But it's this one. So this is what we're going to use in example number 1. So we have 3 quarter notes, and then we're going to put a rest on beat 4. Okay? That's in the first measure. Okay? 2 different ways I can do this. I can either relax my hand like we were saying. So for G, I have this finger, for G5 that is, this one particular flavor of G, I have this finger not really doing anything. So it's kind of ready to just touch all these open strings in the middle. And then these other ones can just relax. So if let's just strum the chord. Now I'll relax the fingers that are touching. Stuff still rings out because this one has open strings in it, right? So the open string chords are actually the hardest to do this with. Once we learn chords that are in closed position like this, there's no open strings, so you really literally just relax your grip and it's all good, okay? So we'll talk about that more when we get into bar chords, but for these, there's open strings, so we can't just relax our hand actually. I need to touch the open strings too. So this finger isn't doing anything for this chord, so I can just kind of relax the hand and also relax the finger back down to the fretboard here, back down on the strings that is, so it stops ringing. Okay, that's one way to do it. That almost took a little too much time for me, so I think I actually use a combination of this hand over here. So this is another way to do it. Now this time I won't even release the pressure. I'll just hold this grip and I'll use only this one to mute the strings. almost like a karate chop. So instead of a strum on beat 4, I do like a karate chop there. And really, I would probably use a combination. This is the type of thing I don't like to think about. It should just kind of happen naturally. So at first, we probably need to think about it a little bit, right? That's why I've designed these exercises to be really simple and give you the opportunity to think about it, okay? But really what this is working towards is where we just kind of do this naturally to help our rhythms sound better as we get more advanced, okay? So it should be sort of this cooperation between the two hands where you're not really thinking about it. But at first, I would encourage you to kind of notice what's happening. Try it with just this hand. Try it with just this hand. See what happens when you kind of combine them. Okay? All right. Great. So that's what we have in the first measure of example 1. And then in the second measure, we have a strum on beat 1, a rest on beat 2, and a strum on beat 3, rest on beat 4. Third measure, strum on beat 1 and 2, rest on 3, strum on 4. Then we have a rest on 1, strum on 2, rest on 3, strum on 4, finally with a big old whole note strum to end the piece. Okay, so let's go ahead and try that together, please. Example number 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, great job. In example number 2, we're going to do the exact same thing, but now we're going to do a C chord, okay? Because C is a little bit of a different shape. It also has a few open strings in it, and we need to make sure that we know how to mute those when we play too. So for this one, I tend to use my pinky. So for this one, I was saying this finger is not doing anything, the index, so I could kind of use that to lay down on the strings. On this one, my pinky isn't doing much, so I'm going to kind of employ this one to kind of help. I kind of lay the pinky down as I also relax these fingers a little bit. And now this can be a good way of controlling your pinky when you're not using it, because when it's new, it can be the hardest one to use, and it can be kind of often way over here off the frets. Sometimes when we're new to playing guitar, our fingers fly off the frets like this, and we don't want that. We want them all to stay very close to the guitar at all times in case we need them. I sometimes work with beginners who, when they aren't using their pinky, they even tuck it in towards their palm here, and sometimes it ends up sort of like behind the neck of the guitar. And I don't like that, because if you need it, you have to bring it all the way back out to the front of the guitar, right? So I don't think it should ever be over here. So this exercise is great because it kind of gives us a little awareness of what the pinky's doing while we hold the C chord. It's just kind of hanging out there. I'm not using it, but it's kind of hanging out. Now, when I relax my hand, it touches down the strings and it helps me mute. Okay, so this is a little bit tricky, but a great exercise, because if you can develop that pinky independence and strength where it doesn't have to go flying off and it stays here, that will help you in a number of ways in your guitar playing. It'll help you help your technique to be more solid. Okay, great. So just kind of be aware of that, but that might be a little advanced for you to focus on, so you may not need to focus on that too much. You can also use your palm mute over here to mute the strings and not worry so much. So don't overwhelm yourself thinking about all the different applications of this. Kind of latch on to what you feel comfortable about and find a way to make the strings not ring out where we have the rests written. That's it. Okay, let's go ahead and try example number 2 together, please. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, excellent job. In example number 3, we're going to do the same thing with a D chord now. Okay, so the D chord has this open D in it, and my pinky does kind of hang out over here for the D chord. It's not really, wouldn't really be practical to have it be way over here. With C, this finger's already over here. This finger wants to kind of tag along. Hanging out over here is fine, but with the D chord, it'd be super weird if I just kind of had my pinky hanging way over here waiting to mute, right? That might be a little more challenging. So I'm going to rely more heavily on my right hand for this personally, but there are different ways to do this. Okay, well, let's just go ahead and give it a try, please. Example number 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Now, in example number 4, we're going to go ahead and put those chords together. Okay, we're going to play a little example where we use all 3 of these chords, G, C, and then D. Now, the rhythm we're going to use is a strum on beat 1 and another strum on beat 3. We're going to mute beats 2 and 4. Okay, let's go ahead and try that together, please. Example number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, cool. So I can do that with just the left hand. Okay, a little harder. Like I said, I was using my pinky for D for that one. A little trickier to do that without using the right at all. Like I said, it's usually a combination of the two. If I use only my picking hand to do this, my palm, I can actually get a nice percussive sound out of this by hitting the guitar almost like a snare drum on beats 2 and 4, like this. Okay, so all of a sudden it's a little more musical now. Now that's not going to be right for every musical context. You don't always want to give an audible kind of percussive knock, but oftentimes you do, especially here on beats 2 and 4. That is where the snare drum, if you're playing with a drummer, and they usually hit their kick drum on beat 1 and their snare drum on beat 2 and 4. 1 and 3 for the kick, 2 and 4 for the snare. Don't worry if you didn't understand that, but basically that's why it sounds cool, because it sounds like we're imitating the job of a snare drum if we do it like that. Okay, but oftentimes we don't really need to imitate a snare drum, and we just want this same rhythm though. So beats 1 and 3 are very important beats structurally. For reading music without writing in any accents, I would know that beats 1 and 3 are supposed to be a little bit more important than beats 2 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, they just sort of naturally have a little bit of extra importance traditionally in Western music. So that's a very common place to strum. So in example 5, we just have half notes on here. We don't have any rests in this example. This is to kind of show you how adding rests to this pattern can be kind of cool. Okay, but this would be sort of a standard way to do it, to strum twice per measure with half notes. So let's just hear what that sounds like. We're going to try it together, okay? Example number 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so you can almost hear, it's almost impossible to like get to the next chord exactly on time without hearing anything in between, right? So in example 6, we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to put a rest on beat 4, and that will just give us a little silence in between to prepare for the next chord. Okay? It makes it sound a little more percussive and a little more intentional when we do this too. And now, when we're doing this naturally, when we get more advanced, it probably won't even be as long as a quarter note. It might be shorter, like an eighth note kind of rest, which we'll learn about at another point. But this is just kind of a great introduction to muting the strings, boom, right back in your chord. Okay? So let's go ahead and try that together. Example number 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, like I said, usually it wouldn't be as slow as quarter notes. Let's try that one a little faster, so it'll sound a little more like what you'll encounter, but really When you're using a real song, it will probably be a shorter rest than that. We haven't learned how to quantify with cymbals yet, so we're gonna just speed this one up and see if it gets a little closer to the sound I'm going for. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, just a way of kind of making these chords sound really important when we get to the new one. It's not just kind of all the sound and then boom, another sound. We have a little silence when we arrive, okay? So learning how to control those silences in between is really important. Okay, great. So in our last example, example 7, we're going to play where that snare drum was that I was talking about on beats 2 and 4. So this is something called the backbeat. So earlier I was mentioning how beats 1 and 3 are typically understood to be more important in Western, traditional classical Western music, right? Twinkle, twinkle. So in American music, we have an African rhythmic influences that blended with these Western traditions. And so this led to something called the backbeat, where instead of placing the emphasis on beat 1 and 3, this little light of mine, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Instead of that, we'll put it on beats 2 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Okay, that's called the backbeat, where we put the emphasis on the other beats that would typically not be important if we were just reading the music and we didn't know which ones were supposed to sound louder than the others. Anyway, that's a bit of an advanced topic and a bit of a divergence from what we're talking about today, but just sort of an interesting thing. It's a very characteristic in rock and roll. Chuck Berry's rock and roll, which I know the Beatles version of more, but got a backbeat, you can't lose it. Right? He talks about the backbeat being an important part of rock and roll, right, in the lyrics to that song. So just kind of an interesting thing. So anyway, we want to get familiar with how to play on the backbeat, to feel beats 1 and 3, but only strum on 2 and 4. This is a characteristic sound of reggae. Okay? So yeah, we'll touch on all sorts of stuff like that as we go on. Again, we're getting a little unrelated to what we're talking about today with the rests, but it is related. Okay, we're gonna just use some of these rests in here to practice this on beats 2 and 4, and that will be sort of an intro for you when you start getting into reggae and playing on the backbeat and stuff. It won't be brand new for you, and you'll already understand how to mute the strings a little bit, which is important for that. All right, well, let's go ahead and give it a try, okay? This is going to be number 7, example number 7. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, is that a little quick? You guys want to try a little slower? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Cool, right? Gives it a totally different sound. So we can have a lot of fun with different rhythms and things like that. As I was talking about, there's kind of a lot to understand about that. Historical things, different things to consider. But in order to execute them technically on the guitar, oftentimes you're going to need to stop your strings from ringing in between these different rhythm patterns you want to do. So I really feel like it all starts with this. So take whatever chords you know and work on not only strumming them cleanly and hearing them all cleanly, but how to get them to stop ringing out quickly as well. Okay? Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this lesson. You can print out all the examples at my website if you want to practice along with these after lesson. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thanks again.